Good evening, I'm John Batchelor. This is the John Batchelor Show. This is traditional Uyghur music from Xinjiang, East Turkestan, in Asia, a conquered state under the boot of the Chinese Imperial Army, time of the revolution of the 1940s. The Uyghurs are a minority in their own land now because of the immigration from the East, from China, the Han Chinese. The Uyghurs are not only a minority, they're a persecuted minority, and we have Uyghur music. We'll play it throughout the evening because I believe that the Uyghur music isn't much on the radio in China. I'm just guessing. Gordon, is that a good guess? Gordon Chang, of my colleague of Forbes.com, joins me from my affiliate WMAL in Washington, that the Uyghur music doesn't get top 40 in Beijing. Can we assume that, Gordon?
Yes, we can assume that, John, and also Uyghur sentiments do not appear in newspapers.
So we are the only, to our knowledge, Uyghur rock station right now on air in the United States, and I will watch very carefully for the podcast downloads in Xinjiang. I have recorded some 2,000 in the last year, and I'll see how our rock fest tonight is received in Uyghur land. Gordon, I welcome to my studio. You're in WMAL. You leave, and in your chair tonight is a colleague of ours, we know her very well, and Stevenson-Yang, who has helped us these last years understand the Chinese economy, which is necessarily non-transparent. Is that a polite word, Gordon, non-transparent?
That's a very polite word, yes, and Anne Stevenson-Yang is perhaps the most acute observer of the Chinese economy.
Anne is co-founder of J Capital Research. She's also author, and she's brought me a copy tonight. I look forward to a conversation, Anne. China, the emergence from and potential return to isolation. Anne, a very good evening to you. Thank you for joining us. We begin with an anecdote. The anecdote is Mr. Soros. Mr. Soros, world famous for breaking the English pound back in the 20th century. But here he is in the 21st century, remarried, has a fresh look on life. And what does he tell us? That China, the Chinese economy, the PRC right now, the economy is in 2014 where the American economy was in 2008. That does not sound good to me. And what's he talking about? What is his concern? And why now does someone as conventional as George Soros see this? Good evening to you.
Good evening, John and Gordon in Washington. I think he says that because China has blown up with so much debt over the last 5 years since 2009. That it's become very financially unstable. The money supply, the New York Times had a great article, I think it was today, showing a graph of China's money supply, which surpassed the U.S. money supply back in 2009 and now is closing in on twice as much cash as circulates in the United States for an economy that's much, much smaller. And all of this is coincident with debt. It really is the same thing as issuing debt. So it's become a very unstable and very volatile economy, and one that's facing a financial crisis in near term, I think.
Gordon?
Well, Anne, you have done a lot of work about basically looking at new channels of credit in China, which probably are not tracked by M2. So, you know, the numbers are going to be so much less than what the real problem is, because all of this credit is really off the radar. When you add that new credit to those skyrocketing M2 numbers, you have a situation which is really out of control.
It really is, and it's an interesting situation in China because the barriers between financial institutions are much more porous than they would be in the United States. So what you do is you drive credit through one new channel and then you tap it out and it starts to look very shaky and it can't accept more credit, so you just switch to a new channel. And all of these different channels are occluded from the banking statistics. They're just different shadow institutions, so they augment the amount of debt that's reported.
I read, Anne, that the new loans in China, and they're prodigious, are not for new projects, but are to service the old loans that are laying dead in the central banks, in the non-bank lending firms. Is that consistent with your information, that new loans are servicing the dead ones?
That's true. We estimate that maybe 60 to 70% of new loans coming into the economy are really just servicing the old loans, and that number has been going up. The productivity or the return on capital investment in China has been going down steadily, according to Chinese academics. We're down to about 17 cents return for every dollar invested now.
Gordon, what does that mean when new loans service the old loans? What are they trying to achieve? Who are they fooling?
Well, I think, John, really what Ann is talking about is that the Chinese economy now is hooked on credit. And the more credit you put in, the problem is that a lot of it has to go to really service the old loans, to roll them over, which means that the economy now is dependent on new, larger and larger amounts of credit, so that it is going to be a blow-up. Because you can't put all that money into an economy and still have it work out well, because it just doesn't work that way. That's why...
Gordon, do that again. It's going to blow up. What does that mean? I mean, if they can continue to create credit, then it could inflate infinitely, correct?
Well, theoretically, it can inflate infinitely, but we know that that doesn't work, because in every crisis there is a point where people lose confidence. And it occurred in the United States in 2008, and it's going to occur in China sometime soon. If not 2014, then 2015, because at some point people are going to get concerned. They're going to run for cover. You're going to have some small incident that spirals out of control, and the People's Bank of China, which is the central bank, cannot control it. And I think that's going to be the issue.
Do you see evidence now, Anne, of concern, of worry, of panic, of preparation for a catastrophe?
I'm not sure that there's panic. There is some disquiet. You've had this phenomenon over really starting in 2006, but accelerating at the great stimulus in 2009, where China has built out this huge amount of housing. And Chinese people buy housing the way other people buy, financial instruments, or as if they were bonds or mutual funds. They buy them as a storage of wealth for the future and hope to sell for their children or for their retirement or something like that. So when you look around and you see that all the new housing is unoccupied, and it's starting to deteriorate, and the maintenance companies sometimes have gone away, the buildings aren't being maintained, or they aren't completed, you get concerned about your ability to sell it.
Gordon?
Yeah, what's really interesting, Ann, is that the value of real estate in general has been increasing pretty much in line with money supply, which would seem to suggest that the Chinese people are investing in real estate really as the best hedge for inflation. I mean, real estate might not be a good investment, but it's better than the alternatives. And that says a lot about China's ability to deploy capital efficiently.
Yeah, but the interesting thing is that over the last year, the prices of real estate, the increase in the price of real estate has been coincident with a reduction in the amount of real estate transactions, and I think a reduction in the retail interest in real estate, because the huge amount of credit that they pushed into the economy last year has very largely gone into real estate as new loans to float the old loans, whereas the end buyers have lost taste for it. So as new loans go in, they're collateralized by the real estate itself, so the lenders and the borrowers have the same pro-cyclical interest in raising the value of the collateral, so you state very high prices, if that makes sense.
It does, and it's another way of talking about, I think we use the metaphor here, house of cards. There's nothing underneath, there's no foundation. They've borrowed everything all the way up. It's all, what? Confidence
all the way down.
Yeah, wait, I don't even know what to call this. They have confidence in a system that has no assets. It's credit. It's not built on anything. Gordon, to your mind, the governance, is it aware of this? Is that why I heard last night on BBC World Service, oh, it's always wonderful to hear BBC World Service and those sonorous voices from parts of the old empire declare that Xi Jinping is fighting a war on corruption. Is that what he means, Gordon? Is his word corruption the same as a credit bubble?
Well, I think that's a separate thing. But essentially, I think, to answer your question, John, they are aware of this. They tried in both June and December not to add new liquidity to the system to try to rein in the credit problem. And what happened? as Ann has pointed out, you had credit squeezes, which were really quite terrifying. So this is not a question of trying to tighten liquidity. This is just a question of not adding liquidity, and they still had crises.
Ghost cities. Ann Stevenson-Yang has an anecdote about ghost cities. We've been talking about them as a novelty, places where no one lives, but the buildings are awaiting a population that does not exist sometime in the distant future. Ghost cities, they turn out to be a much more important metric of the troubles in China than I had reason to believe before. That is something in the GDP that needs to be explained, the ghost cities. Gordon Chang of Forbes.com, he's at my affiliate WMAL in Washington, the nation's capital. And Ann Stevenson-Yang is here. Her new book is China, the Emergence and Potential Return to Isolation. I'm John Batchelor.